Luncheon of the boating party. Let's use the cultural theory, the Carnivoresque, to step inside this image where it will no longer be a painting of a polite Impressionist picnic, but will come alive as a Carnivoresque drama where every hat, every glance, and even a tiny lapdog will expose the hidden power struggle of an eye-wolf pack in transition. When I first saw this painting in 2005 at the Cleveland Museum of Arts, its eye-wolf drama lifted its tail in front of me, oozing with the conflicts of the Carnivoresque. This video will uncover for you the ancient theatrical instincts encoded in this painting's composition, revealing how Renoir staged a silent but explosive story of alphas, omegas, betas, and at the heart of the scene, the rising wag. Why does this image feel as if it leaps off the canvas to come alive? Let's break it down and expose the archetypal mechanics that make a flat image pulse with narrative energy. The Carnivoresque has one fundamental plot, 4 standard characters, and a plethora of possible illustrations, and this is one of them. But before I apply it to this painting, let's do a review of the Carnivoresque. For those who have been following my eye-wolf videos and are well versed in its terms and structures, feel free to jump ahead to where I apply it to the luncheon of the boating party. Thank you for subscribing. Your support is a great encouragement and about the only reward I do get for having spent decades of my life developing the Carnivoresque. For those of you who haven't subscribed, feel free to jump on the bandwagon and hit that notification bell to keep informed when there are new videos. All for free! I don't have a Patreon page. I'm an unmonetized content creator, a YouTube beta serf who will never make any money from my life's work. So if nothing else, a thumbs up from you as a pat on the head would be nice. The Carnivoresque provides simple character types and plot tools to analyze any story. The Carnivoresque is the modern echo of a postulated society of origin, resonating in our storytelling up until this very day. It is the ongoing reverberation of our invention of the first totemic metaphor, I-wolf, and this original totemic identification is what, in the end, has made us human. The Carnivoresque is a reminder that we are apes and that dogs are wolves. Human Carnivoresque society is a culture of origin based upon a hybrid pack of ape and wolf, reaching back at least 40,000 years, an ancient cross-species cultural exchange that led to the first human thought of I-wolf, which was a totemic identification that invented the first metaphor, sparking the development of full-blown language, moving it beyond simple mimetic communication. Metaphoric thinking is the breakthrough that led to our ability to conceptualize and explore complex or abstract ideas, and I-wolf was the key that unlocked this ability. To summarize again, the Carnivoresque posits that modern civilization evolved from I-wolf totemic culture, and this is still mirrored in our behaviors up until this very day and is reflected in the plot structures of our stories and the unconscious use of the canine as a cultural symbol. Like the wolf pack, Carnivoresque culture is based upon pair bonding, where a breeding pair is supported by the collective labor of the submissive members of the pack, who are called betas. The dominant female chooses the den site, and this role is labeled omega by the Carnivoresque. The alpha, the dominant male of the wolf pack and Carnivoresque culture, marks and defends a territory around a den site. Wolves are territorial, and when we started to live with wolves, we began to mirror their territorial behaviors. Furthermore, since small hunting groups are extended families, this can lead to inbreeding. Our early ancestors also developed a behavior similar to the wolf pack, which is the dispersal individual, and this outsider role continues to show up as a central character in our storytelling, as the wag. Just to be clear, the alpha, the omega, betas, and wag are all roles within a social structure and are not necessarily gender-specific. It is not a fixed hierarchy, but in fact is an aboric hierarchy where the outside devours the inside in an endless cycle. Power is a rhythm and not a prison. In Carnivoresque culture, the symbolic equivalent of an erect tail signifies dominance. The symbolic equivalent of a tail between the legs signifies submissiveness. When a beta protagonist raises its symbolic tail, it is confronted by the alpha antagonist or the omega antagonist. If a beta keeps flicking its tail, it is driven from the pack and becomes a wag. Wags are the ones who form new packs or replace an alpha or omega. The echo of this evolutionary cultural shift is the archetypal plot that continues as a subconscious shadow beneath the surface of our storytelling. Alpha, omega, beta, and wag are its basic characters. Now, let's take a look at Luncheon of the Boating Party. Renoir's painting of a social gathering, bustling around a table scattered with half-empty wine bottles amidst the leftovers of a noonday meal, provides an excellent critique of the four Carnivoresque characters and its basic plot. In the foreground left of the painting, a dog has been taken off the floor and now sits on the table in defiance of polite convention. And in the spirit of ebullient social interplay, it waits patiently as it is about to be kissed. The Luncheon of the Boating Party is a wonderful example of how the Carnivoresque shows up in the various artistic expressions of that bizarre animal, the naked ape. I also call the naked wolf. While most standard descriptions of this scene focus on various characters, where documentarians base their analysis upon the historical records of this event, drawing their details from the knowledge of Renoir's relationship to the real life, but now long dead, people illustrated in the painting, a theatrical, Carnivoresque reading of this image provides insight into why the underlying dramatics here continues to make a silent image animate with audible action as the viewer imagines an afternoon vista next to the river Seine. In the mind's eyes, this painting comes alive before the viewer. Most commentators miss the fact the dog in the foreground is central to understanding of this painting's subliminal tale, where like a Pavlov's bell, the little dog rings the subconscious mate of the audience's drooling imagination. The painting is not simply a stagnant reflection, because it is as if the viewer looking at the painting has just witnessed a curtain rise on a stage play, where the action on the other side of the invisible fourth wall now begins. Even the location laid out before the viewer is constructed as if it were a theater set. Stages of the time were raked, built on an upward slope, rising away from the audience, designed this way to improve visibility and create a stronger illusion of depth. And just like a theater where front is downstage and back is upstage, this open-air cafe has a very deep perspective for a small, closed location where people sit so close together, yet at the same time seem so far apart. In addition, the awning acts as a drape in the same way as in theater, where the bottom of the raised curtain draws a line across the top of the stage when it is lifted. In contrast to the floor with its acute angle upwards, this awning's angle is much straighter than the railing below, which rises up towards it. But a painting is not three-dimensional. While theater stages were raked upwards in order to facilitate an audience's ability to see the action in the distance, a painting will also close the stage in sideways, using the added perspective to give the illusion of the two dimensions in front of us are actually three. However, in this case, Renoir consciously or unconsciously is not just using the lines of perspective to draw the visual, he's also using the lines converging to and from the distance to stage dramatic potential. The scene before us is a triangle, a classic alpha, omega, and wag triangle, where the stability of the alpha, omega, beta pack has been thrown off kilter by a wag. As previously stated, the pantheon of the Carnivoresque is based upon when we first formed a totemic eye-wolf hybrid pack of human and wolf, where power in this postulated tribal pack was shared by the alpha and omega breeding pair and supported by the betas. And this painting center stage, there is a table with red wine bottles made from the blood of grapes, standing upright like the erect tails of dominant wolves or a threatening wag. Furthermore, inebriation often suggests social disorder, chaos, and reversals. The dog on the table is also signifying a reversal of normal social order, where polite convention has been ignored. The dog's butt is resting on the white linen of the tablecloth. In addition, the puppy is being held up by the young woman as if it were a child, thus identifying the table as the symbolic den site and makes this woman the omega of the image. Given that much of the scene is a carnival of flirting centered around a table, it is interesting to note who is looking at whom. The omega sitting in the foreground with the dog is looking into the canine's eyes, and this lapdog embodiment of the Carnivoresque is looking directly back into her eyes. This is the woman who commands beta loyalty and also has the power to choose who will be the new alpha of the pack. And given she is just about to kiss a lapdog she has taken off the floor, this does not bode well for the present alpha. A dog sitting on a table is a reversal of polite social convention, and it symbolizes how a lapdog beta can become the hidden wag under the Carnivoresque table who one day receives the omega's kiss. Directly across from the omega, who holds the canine embodiment of the Carnivoresque, and also sitting in the foreground at the table, is a young man sitting backwards on a chair. He is looking directly at the woman holding the dog. An invisible straight line can be drawn between their eyes, and he is also sitting backwards on the chair, making this a further evocation of reversal, thus marking him as the wag in the picture. The rural location of the luncheon also points towards reversal of norms. This group from Paris has traveled to the suburbs on the train to a riverside cafe where they can boat on the water and eat a good meal in the country. The party in the picture can be divided between those who have gone boating and those who have not, or perhaps between those who have rowed and those who have simply sat in the boat. Part of what this picture illustrates is the class divisions of the time. But the last half of the 1800s in Paris was also a time when classes were beginning to intermingle, and this record of a luncheon at the Maison Fournaise in the suburb town of Chateau is a good example of a possible meeting between seamstresses, painters, poets, actresses, secretaries, foreign journalists, wealthy editors, colonial officials, bureaucrats, and barons. Top hats and bowlers, straw hats and bonnets contend in the shade of a Sunday afternoon on a porch suspended between the hotel and the river, where this moment reveals the tension between the fixed and the moving. A faint railway bridge in the distance, partly obscured by the awning, connects the participants to Paris with a 20-minute train ride. But here, by the river, they are in a realm away from the center. The railway is often seen in this picture as a symbol of modernism, but at the same time the image also suggests that despite the arrival of modernism on the scene, movement here is still connected to the older wind on the river, where sailboats glide. Even if the train of history crosses over the stream of the past, the water below still reflects the timeless possibility of betas becoming wags, and wags becoming alphas and or omegas, in the never-ending cycle of the Carnivoresque. The young sailor, with bare arms and a straw hat sitting backwards on his chair, is clearly the wag of the image. This quietly confident fellow, with his legs straddling his chair, firmly holding the shoulders of its backrest, is balanced with the omega holding the dog, and he represents the rising wag who will become the new alpha of a reconfigured pack. While in fact this is Gustave Caillebotte, a painter friend of Renoir, and the woman holding the dog is Hélène Chergut, a model who Renoir would eventually marry 10 years later. In this picture, I would argue, the people in it are less of a historical representation and more of a theatrical projection by Renoir, where, like actors, the personalities are taking on a projected theatrical role in order to bring the drama of the image alive for the viewer. They are models posing for a painting. Hats are an important signifier in this painting, and there is only one erect top hat in the picture, and that is worn by the old alpha, who stands with his back to the viewer, pushed into the background, where he faces towards a railway bridge in the distance. For now, this alpha is holding his tail up, but for how long? This character, obviously dressed in the most expensive male outfit of the group, is isolated and ignored at the very back of the gathering, and even the young man who is standing next to him is not held by his converse relaxation, and instead is looking across the entire expanse of the cafe territory towards the wag who is sitting in the right-hand corner at the front of the painting. Furthermore, most of the women in the picture are either looking directly towards the wag with adoring eyes or are catching a sideways glance as they take a drink, watching the wag's intense focus upon the omega. No woman is looking towards the top hat alpha, who himself has turned his back on the entire Riverside pack and is perhaps looking at the young man who is standing next to him. But given the young fellow beside him is watching the wag and not giving his full attention to this alpha, this top hat alpha is most likely looking longingly at the railway bridge, wanting to go back to Paris in the good old days when he was a rising wag himself, commanding the attention of all. However, this alpha isn't totally ignored, and standing behind the omega, another young sailor with bare arms and a strong hat peers at the top hat in the distance. His outfit is almost identical to the wag's, and his muscular arms bulge with his head cocked slightly backwards as he peers down his nose at the alpha in the distance. The muscular young man standing in the foreground is attached to the omega by his proximity. And while much can be made of the location of the erect lapdog's head in relation to this figure's body, in contrast, the dog's extended front legs closely echoes the position of the wag's arms on the other side of the table. The muscular young man's stance does not evoke reversals, but marks a steadfast beta loyalty to the omega despite a possible shift in the pack's alpha. Being a beta does not necessarily mean a character is weak. It is simply a role to be filled in the pack, and a healthy pack is made up of strong betas as well as strong alpha and omega. With this strong sailor, here hats again can be used to analyze the roles of the characters involved. This beta's plain straw hat has a similar shape to the omega's decorated hat, which is adorned by flowers crowning her blooming fertility. And while this bearded beta's hat has a brim which is turned upwards at its back, it is as if the hat's brim is an extension of the hairs on the back of his neck. His hat is domed, and he is not so much lifting his tail in his own claiming of territory, but he is bristling the hairs on the back of his neck as he gets ready for a possible pack conflict. Indeed, the two men in the foreground wearing yellow straw hats and white t-shirts are very pensive in expression given the frame, the overall appearance of light-hearted gaiety in the group. In subtle contrast, a cigarette pinches between the wag's fingers. It points towards the floor, having just been pulled from his mouth. His eyes focus on the omega across from him. The fumes of the cigarette hang in his mouth. His lips purse. Smoke is about to suggestively stream upwards as the women all around watch. In contrast with the muscular beta's dome straw hat, this wag straw hat has a cylinder shape similar to the alpha's top hat. While the wag's hat is not erect for now, it does have a dark band, and the brush strokes forming the circular weave of its cylinder are fluid, giving the effect of compressed energy. Top hats could be flattened to save space when stored, and the popping up of a top hat by a debonair character on stage is always done with a certain flair, and this pensive wag also appears if he is about to stand up. In addition, sailing is a wind-blown traveling upon water which defies fixed territory. The hat he wears is suited to sailing, but it is also of a shape which shadows the shape of the alpha's top hat. While it is unique amongst the group, the wag's hat is practical, thus also connecting him to the pack where straw hats are in the majority. In contrast, the top hat of the old elf is out of place in this rural riverside location, and it does not command with the same authority it would in the urban context of Paris. Perhaps it's a bit of a stretch to say the wag's hat is suggestive of a compressed straw hat about to pop up into a top hat, but every other hat in the painting has a curved top, and these two both have a flat surface and a more similar shape when compared to the others. It's hard to know the subliminal image references of a bygone era when contemporary viewers of this painting would be familiar with top hats and their variable possible references. However, given a wag embodies the possibility of shape-shifting, who knows how a French painter in the 1800s would be directed by the subconscious presence of the ancient Carnivoresque cultural influences in his construction of this then modern image. Well, certainly if this was a scene from a 1940s Hollywood musical, the man sitting backwards in the chair would have a straw hat that popped up. Would pull out a hidden cane as a symbolic raising of the wag's tail, and then break into song and dance as the dog on the table excitedly barked, wagging an uncontrollable tail. However, this painting precedes the arrival of Hollywood musicals and is more reflective of the histrionics of theater rather than the sensationalism of cinema. In actual fact, Renoir was known for buying timbales straw hats to give to his friends to wear. Its name comes from the resemblance to the timbale drum, and there is also a French cake pan called timbale. Supplying hats to be worn would seem to suggest some effort on Renoir's part was put into constructing the costume shown in the painting. Indeed, similar headwear is one way to mark members of a tribe or group. This suggests there was some staging involved in the construction of this image. The opening curtain of a play often rises well after events have been set in motion. But Act 1 also begins before the outcome of the rising conflicts can be predicted. The luncheon of the boating party is a collection of people who've traveled from Paris to go boating. We see them after the midday meal has been finished. The cafe is noisy and boisterous. This can be shown by the woman on the left, who is holding her hands up to her ears, trying to hear the men who are standing right next to her. If a line is drawn from this woman to the elf at the back of the painting, then another line is drawn to the other man in the middle of the painting who is turned away from the viewer, with an additional line drawn between the sitting man wearing the bowler hat and the top hat alpha. We have a small triangle which represents the old alpha, omega, beta order as it fades into darkness. The brown man in the middle represents a beta who, like the old alpha, has his exposed back turned away, thus connecting him to this alpha. And his dome bowler hat shows he is a beta because it matches the shape to that of the dome hat of the muscular beta of the pack who stands behind the rising omega. The beta in the middle, dressed in plain urban clothes, is surrounded by a growing pack of straw hats, and while this bowler hat beta is perhaps looking at a female with a dome straw hat in hopes of a wag possibility of his own, her eyes look past him towards the t-shirted wag in the foreground. This beta, in the middle of the picture, has only turned halfway round on his seat. His chair is still faces in the direction of the old alpha. His back is to the new omega in the foreground. The woman in the straw hat he is looking at is looking past him towards the rising wag of the image. The old pack is being pushed to the back of the image as a new pack arises. The fancily dressed woman with her hands to her ears represents a past Omega whose territory has not been properly marked and defended by her Alpha. She is pushed to one side and is surrounded. One man, with a straw hat and a striped shirt similar to the awning which encloses the space, has his arms snaking around the fancily dressed woman on the far right. Her stance, with her hands up to her ears, suggests she is isolated by the cacophony of voices swirling around her, and in the same way as the declining Alpha, who is no longer turned towards the group commanding the power of the gaze, this elegantly dressed woman is no longer in the limelight of being listened to, but is pushed into the shadows where she is silent and even struggles to hear and understand what's going on around her. This is actually Jeanne Samaret, a famous actress, a person who is obviously accustomed to being center stage and in the limelight. An audience would listen attentively to all she said. In this image, she is silenced and pushed to one side in the shadows. Renoir's genius is not just that he has shown his skill in painting a snapshot picture of a group of friends meeting by a river to enjoy wine and a meal, but his genius is in the balancing of the lines of perspective with the darting glances of those who he stages within the frame of his artistic medium. Each of these glances tells a story about what is going on between the flirting characters. Indeed, there are many triangular glances taking place in this image, and while none of the characters here are dancing, with perhaps the exception of the dog, their eyes dance for them as the timeless viewer standing outside of the painting has their own eye drawn into the image to explore the possible can excitement of a once-upon-a-time carnivoresque afternoon next to the river Seine. Does my carnivoresque reading of this image seem a bit far-fetched? Before closing, let's take a quick look at another image by Renoir, which he painted 4 years earlier, Bal du Moulin de la Galette. Here there is dancing on a Sunday afternoon in a Paris park. This painting is similar to Luncheon of the boating party, yet there are subtle differences. The awning at the top is replaced by a drapery of foliage. In this one, the top hat is not alone. There are many in the crowd, and he is facing the viewer, even if his face is also blocked by one of the straw hats. In addition, 2 women at the front of the picture, similar to the Luncheon of the boating party, are also sitting at a table. The one in the Omega position from the previous image is looking at the young man sitting at the table across from her. Here, he is only turned halfway around in his chair instead of the confident, full reversal backwards chair. He is also wearing no hat at all. The only other figure wearing no hats are children. Many in the image seem to look past this hatless young man to something outside of the picture frame, as if waiting for something to happen. He is not commanding the attention of many. More seem to be focused on Mr. Top Hat, and most striking of all, the young woman in the Omega position at the front of the painting is wearing a dark hat that is very similar to a top hat. Similar scene, very different energy. Here, the old order is holding, only people are up and dancing, beginning to look outside the frame. What will happen next? A luncheon. A luncheon of a boating party. But who will be on the Carnivoresque menu? So there you have it. A Carnivoresque reading of the Luncheon of the Boating Party. What do you think? Do you like this reading of the image? Alpha, Omega, Betas, and Wag. 4 simple character types to analyze narratives. Do you prefer the elitist jargon of postmodern literary theory where the purpose is to deconstruct all meaning in contrast to exploring, constructing, and understanding? As a young boy, when not in school, I was put into my father's shop and told to fix machines. One does this by understanding mechanics. So when I turned to literature and became a poet, I became fascinated by the machinery of words and the hidden mechanics of the stories we tell about ourselves. Like an engine that has a click and a clank when it runs, I began to notice that canine references in stories were often being used in a particular way. Canine reference then followed by change in status of the central character. Like a dog lifted from the floor to be put on a table and kissed, the Wag was born. Like, subscribe, share, thumbs up, ring that bell. Would love to hear what you think in the comments. Keep your tail wagging high, and remember to howl at the moon.